I mean, sensible business models is not something that the government develops, at least not if you live in a market economy and not a planned economy. I mean, the process is as all other processes on the free market. It's a trial and error process, and it might take some time until old, copyright-based business models are replaced, but it's going to happen eventually, and probably sooner the less involvement you have from politics. One interesting fact is that while, I mean, today you're talking about, people talk about file sharing, killing the entertainment industry, such as movies, music, and so on. But the reality is that while file sharing and also illegal file sharing is flourishing, you have an entertainment industry that's growing with 6% a year, and that's the industry's own numbers. The book sales are up, and I mean, you might have heard that the recording industry have cut their turnover has been cut in half in 7 years between 2000 and 2007.
That's good news.
Well, but what's happened at the same time is that the music industry as a whole has higher incomes now than ever before. So it's very important to make those distinctions between a certain business model within the music industry and the music industry as a whole. And I think you can reason like this when you talk about movies, computer game industry, and so on. I mean, you can see online gaming in the computer game industry. That's
Increased year by year since the advent of Napster. So one of the middlemen, the record labels, which take 93% of the cut, that's not a made-up number, are going away, becoming irrelevant. That means that for an entrepreneurial artist, there are more opportunities than ever to live off your art.
Or we could take maybe something like software industry, where this model has already changed pretty much to the open. But let's go to a question. We had one here.
Let's go back to something you said earlier, Richard. I think you said that Sweden should take a lead in reforming copyright laws.
Mm-hmm.
And you think that Sweden has a certain margin of freedom here. I see a problem here that a lot of the copyright law is common market legislation. It's governed by directives of the European Union. So I wonder if you could give me a practical example. What specific regulations you think should be changed in Sweden, and what would happen then?
Sure, absolutely. I won't go into too much detail because I can talk about this for hours. But to give you one example, the European Copyright Directive, which we're bound by in Sweden, explicitly states that the member states can exempt copying done by a natural person for private use from copyright under some conditions. So there it is. It's written into the directive. You can allow file sharing. And a lot of people don't know about this. And second approach would be simply to ignore the directive. I think politicians think too much like lawyers and too little like businessmen. If you have an agreement and the cost of keeping the agreement is higher than the penalty for breaking it, then you should break it. So if push comes to shove, I think we should legislate a copyright. I think we should create copyright legislation that is more favorable to Swedish business and Swedish cultural development. If we get a fine from the European Union because they believe it's not entirely in line with European directives, so be it, let's take the fine, because the gain to Swedish economy is greater still. And the third approach, if we change the copyright law in Sweden, which still we can do, it's just a matter of a decision in Parliament, then it's going to take at least 5 years until all the gears have turned and come to a conclusion somewhere down in Brussels or Strasbourg or where's the EU court? Well, somewhere down on the continent. And in 5 years, this discussion is going to be over. There are pirate parties in pretty much every Western European country by now. There's Spanish Partido Pirata, French Parti Pirata, German and Austrian Piratenpartei, and so on and so forth. This is not something specific to Sweden. This is very much a global undercurrent, like the liberal movement, like the worker movement, like the green movement. Every 40 years, this happens.
Fred, does that answer your question?
At least the latter part does, because that's a feasible, would be a feasible strategy. Use the 5-year period to bring change. But perhaps I can comment on this to the extent that as you said, private use is legal. Private copying is legal in all, at least in Scandinavian copyright law. It has always been, and it is today. You're absolutely correct.
Not entirely, but okay.
Well, more or less, so that private painting was legal, at least in Finland. But for instance, there are certain regulations about DRM which are mandatory, which are based on directives.
Okay, I'd need to go into detail on those, and I think that's a little much too detailed for this discussion. But let me at least give you the answer that we've looked into the directives. We say that A, we can change copyright. We can legalize file sharing tomorrow. C, we would do it anyway. And no, B would do it anyway. And C, even if they'll get angry about it, it's going to take so long that the wheels have already turned. So it's going to be too late to do anything about it.
I have an alternative here, the super simple solution, which is just, I mean, it's not completely satisfactory, but it's very simple. It's a freeze. Okay, no new laws on top of those we have already. And then just explicitly state some positive rights in how we interpret the existing law. For example, anonymous internet access should remain legal. Stream ripping software should remain legal. Indexing should remain legal. There's no problem with combining that with existing law. And then tools will develop and file sharing will be practically legalized. And then we can go on and reform the law. I'm not against it. I'm just trying to present the very simple solution.
Well, it's certainly worth considering.
There was a question here.
Yeah, it's a little bit in relation to the last question, but just a comment before that. When you sound surprised that how can government involve in business models, but this is how it works. I mean, they're involved in cultural policy, agricultural policy, shipping, manufacturing, all kind of policies they're involved. There's no such place in the world as a capitalist society in that regard. So this is just another version of it, of course. And unless that we who believe, like I guess everybody here, that something should be done here, start getting our alliances right here, nothing's going to change drastically, I think, of course. And I think also from your perspective, I mean, your perspective is very liberal in the sense you take it's the the liberties that should be in the forefront. I totally agree with you, but I don't think that sells any votes. Also here you need alliances. Those people who are that you can find outside of the Swedish and the Danish and the Norwegian parliaments are workers, consumers. These people are environmentalists, but nobody is fighting for liberal rights. And I guess that's also, I mean, I agree with you totally that it is not a question about consumers, it's a question about users. But at least in Denmark, I can see that when I'm arguing about these things, about copyright law, and saying, well, copyright law should not be a question about protecting rights owners, but consumers, then immediately everybody starts to listen. All the consumer organizations start, well, maybe we should put this on our agenda. But if you're just talking about, well, here's not just another libertarian guy talking about this, nobody wants to hear what you're saying anyway.
One very interesting thing that happened in Denmark is the the Pirate Bay case. Like usually, for those who don't know, that Pirate Bay didn't actually get sued themselves, but I think it was Tele2 in Denmark got sued over allowing access to the Pirate Bay. And immediately all the consumer organizations they just joined Tele2 in the
This is a good example of an alliance, just like what you had the question about Scrove and cryptography. It was not of course, the libertarians